Every morning there are 1, 2, sometimes 3 ripe strawberries for picking. None right now, but soon there'll be a big show of them. And I'll be coming out here picking those berries and then taking them inside to transform them into jam and to freeze them for later on. Now, I've been picking strawberries for most of my life. My very first job at 12 years old was picking strawberries in a field. And I know a thing or two about growing big harvests of berries. So let me take you on a little tour of my strawberry growing setup. I grow them out here in the garden. I grow them in a couple of different types of containers and in a pot. And I'll give you some tips so that you too can grow big harvests of strawberries every year. This is my main strawberry bed, and it has 3 rows of several different types of strawberries in here. Most of them are now in their 2nd year, and some of them on the far corner over there, they're in their 1st year. The leaves are massive, they're soaking up sunshine, and they're protected now against birds and other critters getting in and eating them. The first thing that you need to know about strawberries is that there are 4 different general categories of strawberries that you can grow. The most common one are the June bearers. So they're the big juicy berries that we buy in supermarkets that come out in one massive burst of berries in early summer, and then they're done. There are no more strawberries until the next year. And within that category, there are tons of different varieties that you can choose. The next category is called ever-bearing strawberries, and these are berries that produce a few flushes of strawberries through the summer. Generally 2 flushes, sometimes 3, and these are fantastic for containers because you can continuously go out and check for berries. They're great for kids, and when you're watering your containers, you can keep an eye out for more berries coming on through the year. The next group is called alpine strawberries. They are related to wild strawberries, and they're generally smaller. The actual fruit is smaller too and tartar than more cultivated strawberries. They too produce lots of berries over the summer, and again, they're really fun for kids to pick. The last group of strawberries are called day-neutral strawberries, and they're not as common as the other types. They're generally grown as annuals, and I think that's because they become very exhausted from producing so many berries. Day-neutral strawberries basically create berries, produce them all summer long. And as long as the conditions are warm, they're getting enough nutrients, enough water, they're pumping out strawberries. And they're used, I think, more and more in commercial growing. This row here is El Santa, and next to it is Honoi. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's how I've been pronouncing it for years. And then the last ones over here, these are a mixture of berries that I took as runners from plants from the allotment. So there's, I think, Mulling Centenary in there, as well as some others. So it's just a mixture of different ones. The easiest way to plant strawberries is with potted plants, and they're generally available to buy in spring. However, the cheapest way to get strawberry plants is to buy them as either bare root plants or to create them from runners from plants that you already have. When you do have your plants ready to go and they're all potted up, you can plant them at pretty much any time, but spring and autumn are the best times. If you start with the bare root plants, you do need to pot them up immediately once you get them in the post. And it's dead easy. I have done it many times before, and when you're buying bare root plants, you've got a much wider choice of varieties than if you pop into the garden center. Now, when you do plant them out, make sure that the soil is very rich so that you've amended it with compost or aged manure, and give the plants space. So you can see in this bed, the plants are pretty close together, they seem, because of all the leaves, but they're about 12 to 18 inches apart in all directions. If I wanted to plant strawberries in rows, then I would use that same spacing between plants, but the distance between rows would be about 2 feet so that you can walk through and pick. Once the plants are in the soil, it's a really good idea to top dress that soil with compost or aged manure. It feeds the soil, it feeds the plants, and it helps with water retention as well. It also stops weeds from growing. Another really interesting thing about growing strawberries in beds is that a study has shown that strawberries that are growing in soil that has mycorrhizal fungi attached to the roots actually produce more strawberries. They're healthier plants. It's no big surprise because we're finding out more and more that fungi under the soil help plants to thrive. And that could be one of the reasons that strawberry plants tend to do better growing in open ground and produce more berries than in containers. But again, those mycorrhizal fungi can be added to containers by a granular form. So maybe that's something to consider. In spring, the plants burst into life and they produce lots of new green leaves and tons of flowers, hopefully. They're usually white petaled or pink petaled, and they need pollination from insects, namely bees, to be able to produce fruit. So if you don't have bees in your area, your flowers might not get pollinated and you might not get berries. So encouraging lots of pollinators, encouraging bees to come into your garden really helps with getting lots and lots of berries. When the berries begin forming, they are hard, they are green, and they're not very appetizing for us or for wildlife. So they're fairly safe. But once they start ripening, you really need to take some measures to protect your crop. Otherwise, birds will come and get them, dogs will come and get them. Josie absolutely loves strawberries. And so netting them at that point is a good idea, but not before, because a lot of netting, like this butterfly netting, will stop bees from being able to get inside and pollinate the flowers. So it's kind of a last minute task, is netting them up. Another thing to consider is that soil can cause berries to rot. It can also enable slugs and snails to get to the berries. So lifting the strawberries up in some way is really important. And traditionally we use straw, hence strawberries. So tucking straw under the berries so that they're not touching the soil, they're lifted up. Now here in Britain you can use straw as well, but we do get quite wet summers, and straw and wet ground usually means more slugs than less. And so another thing that you can use is egg cartons. So egg cartons will dry out in between rains and they won't have as many slugs crawling over them potentially as straw. It's my opinion, but you can use whatever you want. Just lift those berries up to keep them away from slugs and snails and from rots caused by organisms in the soil itself. With netting, it can be easy to get to your plants, or it can be challenging. Try to make it easier for yourself and don't use too many pins or too many bricks that you're going to find difficult to lift up, because I know from experience if you do that, you can just decide, oh, I'll check another day, or I'll lift that up and harvest another day, and then you end up potentially losing berries. My setup is metal hoops that I've had for years and butterfly netting, and then I use these pins that go into these little clips, and these are all from a company here in the UK called Gardening Naturally. I'll leave a link on the screen if you're interested. Now, there are very few ripe berries down here. I think there's a couple down there, but there are tons and tons of green berries, and there are also runners. Runners tend to really start becoming more evident after the berry flush, when the plants are kind of wanting to create more plants rather than focusing energy on producing fruit. And what they are is an extension of the plants that is reaching out, wanting to settle on some nice soil and then put down new roots to create a new plant. So it's how the plant reproduces, one of the ways. And if you allow all of those runners to run through your bed and set down roots wherever they want, it can really create a congested bed that you have to clean up at some point in the future. And I have a video showing how you do that if that is something that has happened to you. But you can also use those runners to your advantage. You can use them to create plants for free. And what you do is you fill small pots with either potting mix or compost or just garden soil and pin the end of the runner inside and just leave it sitting there. Over time, that runner will start producing roots, and then when you see roots coming out the bottom of the pot, you can snip the runner and harvest that new plant to use in another strawberry planting or even to put in a container. A couple of months ago, I showed you how to plant a strawberry pallet planter, and I have another video showing how to build one of these. You can grow strawberries in containers as well as in the open ground. Generally, they don't produce as large a harvest, but they can still do very, very well. There are some differences to how you plant them up here and some other things that you need to do to make sure that they are productive and healthy, especially over years. Strawberries are perennials, which means that they're in the ground for at least a few years before you replace them. And in containers, they tend to lose a lot more nutrients than out in the open ground. And so a weekly feed of soluble fertilizer is a very good idea for all container plants, but especially heavy feeders like strawberries. You can either buy an organic feed or you can make one yourself using nettles and comfrey and other types of nutrient-rich materials. The plants here are much more closely planted than out in the ground, and you can do that in containers, but you do have to make sure that they have tons of nutrients and they have a bit of space to spread out their roots under the ground. The mix that I've planted these strawberries in is the same mix that I use for a lot of different types of fruit and vegetables. It's about 50% ordinary potting mix called compost in the UK, but just potting mix, and then 50% actual compost. So that could be aged manure, that could be garden compost. And that mix is really rich in nutrients and also usually has a lot of fiber from that potting mix to allow air and moisture to percolate down. It's just a really good growing medium. And you can see that they are probably about 12 inches apart here, but you can see the plants here are much closer. They're kind of stacked on top of one another. And even in their first year, they are producing flowers and fruit. Some say that you should remove those flowers the very first year, but I've never done that and I've not seen any problems with my strawberries over the years. But one thing that, again, I do recommend is that you choose an ever-bearing variety to put into containers. So every time that I'm coming in here to the polytunnel, I can look here and see, are there any ripe berries? And it's not just going to be one time of the year, it's going to be right through the summer. Strawberries can grow well in containers that are smaller than the pallet planter, like this alpine strawberry growing in a pot here by the pond. There are, I think, 2 or 3 plants in here. They're relatively small, but just one plant would do fabulous in this size pot. Again, it's going to need regular nutrients being added, regular watering. All strawberries like moisture retentive soil, and it will just grow on and produce berries all summer long again. So alpine strawberries are similar to everbearing. In fact, they are a type of everbearing, and it's just really nice to walk out here and pick one of these berries or a handful as they ripen. I also have a setup in the greenhouse that is a vertical setup that has some strawberries at the bottom. And I put them at the bottom because more moisture kind of drains down to that area. And when you grow strawberries in a protected area like a polytunnel or a greenhouse, you can get an extra early crop. Strawberries are one of the most delicious and rewarding crops that we can grow, and it can also be very, very simple. They love sun, they love moisture retentive soil, they love nutrients. And if you give them those plus the space to grow, then they will produce berries. And if you protect those berries against birds and dogs and other animals, then you will get a harvest. I guarantee it. Now, if you have any questions about growing strawberries, or you've had any specific challenges yourself, leave me a comment down below and we'll see if we can get you sorted out. And if you would like even more berry growing inspiration, I have a video that you should watch next, because I grow a lot of berries. This is not just strawberries, and there is honestly a berry for everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.